Transfer the ToC to a Logframe and identify indicators, section 3.1. A logframe is different but complementary to a theory of change. A logframe summarizes the theory of change in a matrix or a table format. The logframe includes specific objectives related to project activities, as well as the outputs, outcomes, and indicators with targets connected to those objectives. Key differences between theory of change and the logframe include that a theory of change provides a broad view of a problem, including all the domains and pathways of change that may help to reach a long-term goal. It is non-linear with many cross-sectional linkages and can be adapted to changing circumstances. A logframe is based on a specific intervention. The intervention is chosen by your project, a set of activities that was chosen by your project. It only includes the outcomes that the project is directly responsible for. It is linear and structured. The theory of change describes the conditions required to reach a higher goal or outcome, along with the assumptions and probably rationales for the linkages along a causal pathway that often has many cross-sectoral linkages. A logframe describes, on the other hand, outcomes, indicators with targets, and potential data sources for each indicator in a standard structured matrix or table. A ToC is used to understand the situation and look at the big picture and all the interconnected influences. It is an excellent tool to help project teams reflect, learn, and to adapt activities. On the other hand, a logframe is primarily a tool that provides a framework for monitoring and evaluation that assures accountability. It is a tool that allows projects to show donors how they will track performance. Although transferring a systems thinking model like the theory of change that demonstrates multiple examples of cross-cutting complex causal logics, transferring this into a structured linear matrix may seem like stuffing an octopus in a pigeonhole. There are few simple steps you can take to make this transfer much more easier, and let's talk about those in the next slides. So you should start with one domain of change that you can call purpose. Domains of change that are being targeted by the project can be called purposes. And you can number only those outcomes that are directly feeding into that chosen purpose, the chosen domain of change. Then you just move to the sub-purpose level below the domain of change. Number only the outcomes that directly feed into one sub-purpose, and then repeat the process for each sub-purpose. Because theory of change is not a linear model, do not be surprised if various levels do not line up horizontally, the way they might in other types of results frameworks. What is most important here is the order of arrows that connect each component, not the physical space where a component is located, higher or lower in the model, in the graphic. Do not number outcomes produced by other actors. You will not be monitoring those outcomes in the same way you will track outcomes produced by your project. Actually, outcomes produced by other actors become assumptions in the logframe. This will be explained shortly. So you can identify outcomes that are being produced, delivered by other projects or by other actors with another graphical form, another box, like just in the pictures, like you see here in the picture. Often one outcome feeds into several outcomes above it. How to number outcomes that feed into multiple levels above. Numbering these multiple contributors using a logframe can be a bit confusing, so try to reach consensus among your team about which outcome stream a multiple pathway contributor primarily contributes and number it accordingly. If all things are equal, you simply need to pick one path or the other. Once all the levels of the theory of change are numbered, begin to enter the theory of change components into the Logframe in the same hierarchy as they have been displayed in the theory of change graphic that you have made before. Use the exact same wording when the entire pathway that explains, let's say, purpose 1 has been entered. Then move on to purpose 2, following that pathway all the way down from the purpose to the output. And just include until the output level. No activities are needed at this stage for a Logframe matrix. Outcomes produced by other actors are also entered as assumptions because we assume, based on credible data sources or key informants, that the other actor will be successful in achieving this outcome. Let's say if we are dependent on market access for a certain development project related to smallholders' livelihoods, and there is another project called Field the Future, which is working on this market access. So one assumption will be that the project Feed the Future will have efforts in place that will increase the market access as projected. So this will be a way of expressing such an assumption. Your project may do its best to influence other actors' achievements, but ultimately it is out of your project control. So that's why you include this in the assumptions. Similar to other assumptions in a ToC model, outcomes produced by other actors are necessary to achieve the project results. So, like I've said, as such, it is advisable to develop a plan to coordinate with the efforts of other stakeholders to track progress on these outcomes via continuous discussion, even though your project will not be directly involved in the implementation of the activities of this other project. And you don't need to include this besides the assumption. You don't need to include anything more in your Logframe matrix. It's just for you to have it in your mind as a project team leader that you will need to take some time to discuss with other projects also involved on how could you somehow have feedback information on the achievement of those other outcomes by the other project. So now we move to identifying indicators for all the results that we have in our Logframe matrix. Indicators, they are, let's call them signposts of change, basically. An indicator can be a quantitative or qualitative variable or criterion that measures one aspect of a program or project. An indicator that verifies whether an intended change actually occurred. Indicators tell us how success will be recognized at each step in the pathway of change. So they are verifiable indicators for each outcome, and they should be defined in great detail, and we will see some examples on this. Essentially, you need to take an abstract concept, which is each outcome that you have formulated, and define it in a way that research teams can gather data, information, and track the progress on the extent to which the project is reaching this outcome, this particular outcome. For example, an indicator of an outcome that could be improved access to diverse and quality foods is the prevalence of children between 6 and 23 months of age. They are receiving a minimum acceptable diet, and this can be verifiable through a survey, for instance. You do not need to add indicators to the ToC diagram. Indicators are exclusively to be used in the Logframe matrix. But you must select at least one indicator for every outcome and output that will be transferred to the log. Many donors or development agents have even their own standard indicators, like the International Climate Initiative from the Ministry of the Environment in Germany. So once you are working for such an agency or you are working for a call for such a donor that has some set of standard indicators, you should start by taking this required agent donor indicators and exploring how they may overlay with your ToC diagram, where you can include them in your ToC diagram. Regarding the International Climate Initiative standard indicators, this is a very interesting program that you should read. It should take some time to read inside. They have a lot of information on the web page. And they also have information about the standard indicators that are compulsive for each project that is being financed by the International Climate Initiative. They have a reduction indicator. That means the reduction, they call it reduction indicator because they want accountability. They want a variable for measuring the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and increase in carbon storage. And the variable should be in units of tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in the project or program area. So you should have this type of reduction indicator in all those projects from them. You have also to have an adaptation indicator if you are working on, let's say, restoring mangroves. So you need for adapting to climate change or extreme events. So you have an adaptation indicator, which is requested by the EKI program, which is the number of people that the program directly assists with adaptation to climate change and extreme event impacts or ecosystem conservation, the number of people in the certain communities where this project is working. They also want an ecosystem indicator, meaning the ecosystem area in hectares that is being improved or protected by the program's activities. Let's say a mangrove ecosystem area, so they want to know the hectares that are improved by your project on reforesting this mangrove area, for example. They also want policy indicators, the number of new or improved policy frameworks that your project has managed to influence, has managed to co-work in a participatory way, in co-work with policymakers, have managed to bring in their way. So they also want to know the name of such policies and how many are going to be implemented. They also have institutional indicators, the number of new or improved institutionalized structures like processes, like laws for managing climate change and conserving biodiversity. This can be a platform. Institutionalized structure can be a biodiversity conserving platform that is being implemented in that area, gathering multi-stakeholders around the table and for discussing the improvement of a certain ecosystem like mangroves. They also want a methods indicator, so they want to know about the proved methodological tools from this project, what has the project developed regarding methods for managing climate change or conserving biodiversity. These are always the typical things that International Climate Initiative targets these projects. So here you see a graphic about how these things are expressed, the level of indicators are expressed across the different results. We will have indicators for the impacts, the purposes and the sub-purposes. You have output indicators, right? You have then outcome indicators, and then you have also output indicators. Outputs, this is what your project is going to develop, right? So this can be milestones in your project timetable. So these are the indicators about the output. Output X has been delivered in date XY, for example, would be an indicator for this output. And this is how the logical framework should look like for including the indicators. The first column, you have all your results from the impact through all the different outcomes and outputs. And here I've referred to activities, but you don't need to include the activities in your log framework matrix. Normally they are not asked. I've just included them here, but it's not necessary. So we will have indicators only for the outputs, outcomes, and impacts of your project. Then you have baselines and targets. We'll speak about those afterwards. And also on the sources of verification, how can we verify, where is the data for verifying the trend of your indicator. Then you have the assumptions needed for explaining the underlying process of achieving one outcome after the other. So that's it for the first part. See us then in the second half. Bye-bye.